Very good. All right. Well, I got to tell you, I'm happy that Vickie's here. Vickie's one of my favorite Rotarians, and I remember you well when Ellie and I first came down to Windsor and joined the club. I think you were president or running president shortly after, and I always found you to be very good natured, and I could make you an honorary Dresden person. You would fit right in. Vickie, we've had lots of conversations over the years about your time at the Tunnel Barbecue, or actually the other place I think you were at. And you know people that I know and all the rest of it. But you have come, not that wasn't good, not that being president of our Rotary Club isn't a really, really good thing, but you've had a wonderful career. And I would imagine it's got to be all done. A little bit about Vickie Houston, Director of Education for the Greater Essex County School Board. She was born and raised in Windsor, Ontario. Whereabouts at Windsor? What street did you grow up on?
I grew up on Main Street, Windsor.
Journal Arkansas? Vickie built her legacy in the system that she now leads. She became the Director of Education in September of 2023 after serving the GECDSB in a variety of roles for 25 years. Yeah. Vickie was a teacher, and once a teacher, always a teacher. She was a teacher at the Century Secondary School and Public Alternative Secondary School before becoming a teacher/consultant, vice principal, and principal of Walkerville College Institute. Her professional and advancement continued with the appointment to manage several portfolio responsibilities, including special education, secondary school staffing, human resources. It says here that you are a trained and enthusiastic cook. Vickie enjoys sharing her culinary skills with others, including your husband, Peter, and your children. I forgot. Jeremy. Please give a warm welcome. Welcome back.
Take to the stage.
Take to the little stool. So good morning. It is so fantastic to be here. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. So many memories of so many great things with the club that have happened. And nice to be home here with everybody. I do feel like I'm at home and so many familiar faces. So just a little wee update on Jeremy and Pete. Pete's still working for FedEx. You can imagine during the pandemic, life was, I would say, out of control for him. We probably didn't see each other, which might have been good during a pandemic because I was so busy at work. And he was beyond busy in the courier business because even those that didn't order online started ordering online everything. So busy time. Jeremy, trying to think of when I last was, I think he was starting in Toronto in school. So he finished school, finished with his Master's of Communications from what was called Ryerson University, and is working for Sunnybrook Hospital, a great hospital in Toronto. Has a wonderful pension, which I'm very grateful for because those are unheard of today, and obviously fantastic benefits. Living right downtown Toronto. His apartment is about the size of the podium and pays $2,000 a month rent, but he is elated to be there. So his choice. Hard to believe that we have a 30-year-old child. I'm not sure how that happened, but it did. So, and has a little puppy. Well, she's not a puppy. She's 4 now, who's very busy, and her name is Poppy. So that's an update on the family. So good morning. I am truly honored, and thank you to both Bob and to Irene for reaching out and asking me to come. And so a year in, some days it feels like 100 years in, and then other days it feels like 5 minutes in. Somebody said, you know, retirement. I could actually officially retire. October 1st of 2024 would have been my full retirement date. in education when you reach your 85 factor. So that's your years combined with your age. I would be at my 85 factor. So when the position for director came up, I contemplated more on the don't do it side because I was so close to retirement. And thought, you know, I could end my career in human resources, which was a fascinating position to have taken, particularly being a teacher, not necessarily a human resources side of it, but I think that the critical piece of bringing the education focus into the human resources side was really, really important and does make a difference. And I valued the team I had. They were all trained and educated in human resources, so that was wonderful. And I brought the, you know, teaching, learning, and the system of education perspective to the department. So although COVID was horrible working in HR with every single thing that we had to implement and nobody wanted us implementing it, and I don't even want to go back and think about the things that we did that I can't believe we did to try to make education continue to work. And when you look back, you think about, you know, how many industries unfortunately shut down and people lost their jobs and people lost their businesses. There were very few that continued and at the pace that they continued at, and healthcare would be one of them. So anybody in healthcare, hats off to you for the work that you did during that. And then I think the education piece was a really silent piece that continued every single day. People got a glimpse into what it looks like in school, although school looked very different. You know, often parents were at home trying to work, trying to educate their child, and maybe for a brief period of time, had a better appreciation for teachers and what they do every single day with 26, 27, 32 students in the classroom, not just your 1 or 2 children at home. So that brought so many challenges. And so I thought, do I do it? Don't I do it? Was encouraged by many, including for all of you who love and adore Mary Jean, was a huge mentor to me and said, you know, why don't you just think about it? You'd be great. How do you say no to Mary Jean? You can't say no to Mary Jean. I became a vice principal because of Mary Jean. So I contemplated and then spoke with Jeremy and Pete and said, you know, it's going to be a lot. What do you think? And so both of them said, like, you could do it if you wanted to do it. So then you say, well, if I don't do it, who's going to do it? And you go through all of that. So anyways, put my hat in, didn't think I would ever possibly go from being a co-check girl at the other place restaurant at 15 years old to becoming a director of education. And lo and behold, I got the position. You have to sign a 5-year contract because obviously you don't want that much turnover. You need some stability in the system. So I signed the 5 years and then started last September. And like I said, you know, first year in, you look back and you reflect on the things that went well and you reflect on the things that didn't necessarily go so well. So a couple of real big high level highlights that I just want to talk about, and then really just want to talk with you about, you know, what could we be doing better in education, because in many ways you're so involved in it, and then the partnerships that we do have with Rotary. So I would say, you know, we've had a real focus on so many things. The budget constraints have been unbelievable, you know, and that's everywhere. Costs of everything have gone up. Our labor costs are approximately 80%, 82% of our overall budget. Our overall budget for our board is $550 million for an operating budget. And then we have, you know, capital priorities and those types of things. But the budget constraints, I've been in education, like John said, this is my 26th year. I've never seen budget constraints like I see right now. And that is really, really difficult because you're educating children and you can't do more with less when it comes to education or with healthcare. So that has probably been, I inherited a deficit budget. This has nothing to do with my predecessor. It has to do with the funding formula. Special education, severely, we have a $10 million deficit in just that area. We have a growing area in special education for children with special needs. And they're becoming more and more and higher, and far more complex. I spent many years in spec ed, very different needs today than I would say even a decade ago. And we don't have the funding, so we take funding from other envelopes, which then of course takes away from other areas that we should be spending. But $10 million just in special education. And no parent wants to hear, we don't have the funding to support your child. And I don't blame them. But the reality is we don't have the funding to support the children, especially with the highest needs. I would say that our second challenge is post-COVID recovery in terms of learning loss, and I'll talk a little bit about that more in depth. And then I would say probably a third priority for me was our efforts in terms of anti-racism and inclusivity, a sense of belonging for both our staff and our students. And oftentimes people just focus on our students, which is critical. That's the business we're in, but our staff as well. Our staff need to feel safe and included at school, need to be respected and feel included. So, and then infrastructure, in terms of our improvements, we have very, very old buildings, very old. We have some of the oldest buildings in the province. And when you look at a school like Walkerville, or you look at a school like Kennedy, absolutely beautiful, you know, over 100-year-old buildings. You don't build schools like that anymore. But to keep schools like that costs substantial money. You've probably seen the renovations that happened at Walkerville and the renovations that happened at Kennedy. Those were millions and millions of dollars. And people criticize that and say, you know, why don't you just tear it down and build a new school? Well, then you lose the character, you lose the heritage, you lose the life of those buildings. So when we put in for capital priorities to the ministry, they look at all the different business cases and they supported them. So obviously they agree with the heritage in maintaining those buildings as well. And if you get a chance, you know, ever want to go in and see them, they're absolutely breathtaking. Back to their original, with improvements to education to 2024, which is nice, but in a century-old building. And then a big focus, as you know, for me is our community partners, and worked really hard last year in terms of the work that we can do within our community. A school and a school board is the community. And you think back to the old school, right, in the middle of the community and everybody centered around that. For me, that's critical that we get back to that. We're fortunate in the public board that we have schools in every single community, every municipality. Some are really small schools, which are really expensive to maintain, but it's worth it because that's the school of that community. The ministry put a hiatus on closing schools. You've probably noticed there's been no uproar from communities that their schools are closing. The last school our board closed was Harrow. Anybody who was involved in that, we still haven't got over it. I'm not sure we ever will. I don't think I'm even welcome in Harrow sometimes because I was a superintendent at the time. But community really, really evolves around the school. So the importance of that and reaching out to our community partners who can offer some services to students that we can't necessarily offer because we don't have either the technology or B, the ability to offer certain programs for students. So like I mentioned, in terms of the budget, we try to optimize our resources as much as we can. We try to measure in terms of cost savings. Myself and my senior team, fortunate to have Shelley Dubin on it. Hardy and I spoke about that, but an absolute gem and a pleasure to have her back. And a safe space for me because we know each other so well. Nice to be able to bounce some ideas off of her, and she has experiences from other boards, which is really nice that she brings to the table too. But the rest of the senior team, myself, it's always great to have an accountant, but it's awful to have an accountant at the table because they keep you in line. I have a fantastic business superintendent who of course is an accountant, and every single thing she says, we have a deficit, we have a deficit. The answer is no, we have a deficit. I understand, but we have children to educate. I get it. I get both sides of it. So nice to have her there as well. But we have some significant pressures on our budget of where do we spend our money. And really the ministry, in my opinion, and I'm not going to get into political bashing because that's not my arena, that's for my trustees to do. which I'm sure you've watched the news, and some of them do a really good job with that and others don't. But we just don't get enough money. And people will say, you know, what kind of funding do you get? We get about $11,000 per student to educate them as a base. That's not a lot of money. Even though we have 36,000 students, not a lot of money to provide education for them. So despite all of the hurdles with the budget and looking at every single area, we have about 5,000 employees. Over 1,000 of those positions are not funded through the ministry. That's a lot of jobs that are not funded. And some examples of those would be social workers, some psychologists. Actually, our custodians are not funded, which is shocking. Of how do you not pay to have custodians? Because if you don't have clean schools, the health unit's going to shut you down. So why would they not fund those positions? There's very, very, very little of what would be considered discretionary funds anymore. They are all enveloped. Every single thing is enveloped of where you can spend your money. And then the reporting all goes to you cannot spend outside of that area. Our board has a tremendous focus on equity, and we receive zero funding from the ministry to do that. So we squirrel away and pocket away some money in some places, but not nearly enough to do the really important work that we need to do in order to represent the students that we're serving in our schools, because we don't currently do that. So post-COVID education, for anybody who has grandchildren, young children, or the recovery that's necessary. Been in a quarter of a century in education. I have never seen a deficit in children like I see right now. It actually makes me quite emotional to know how far behind many children are. And children who would have probably progressed at a natural rate, even those children are really, really struggling. The social piece, unbelievable. They don't know how to get along with others. And when you think back to when you were in preschool and kindergarten, you learned to share, you learned to be nice, you learned to be kind, you learned all of those things when you started in that first learning school environment. Children of COVID did not have that. They had none of that. They were at home. They were learning on a screen, which is probably the most horrible way to try to learn. As a teacher, it's impossible to try to teach. Adult models sometimes will work well in an online learning environment, sometimes at the high school level. Lower than that, really not great, unless you're in extreme like a pandemic or remote situation. So the learning gap, and honestly, I don't have the answer. I don't know what to do. It's just going to take time, but we really, really need to put a tremendous effort in trying to close the gap. So our board has taken a big focus on kindergarten to grade 3. Every single thing, every bit of effort, every focus, everything needs to go to the children who are currently in grade K to 3. Doesn't mean we're ignoring the 4 to 12s in our adult program, but really intensive interventions happening at that point to try, whether it's in reading. I have a 8-year-old great nephew. He can't read. He should be reading by this age. Has a learning disability that went undiagnosed because he wasn't in school. Mom didn't know what to look for. Mom was busy in the restaurant industry. Not blaming, but that's just the natural things. And here we are at 8. He hates school already, doesn't want to go because he knows that he's different than some other children in the class and that he can't read. He's one of thousands. So closing that gap is really critical. We offered many summer camps this year. We pretended it was camp and fun, but really it was about math and literacy. And the kids thankfully didn't know any better that they were learning, despite the fun activities that they did. The focus really was on literacy and numeracy. And then we offered summer school, as we traditionally do, for our high school students who are behind in credits. So much work to be done in that area. If there's ever, research that's done about the impact that COVID had on education, I think that there would be a lot of negative in that research to show what's happened to students over the years and to staff. Our staff well-being is probably at the lowest point it's ever been. Worked hard last year to try to improve that. The disconnect of staff is bigger than it's ever been. And just a real difficulty in trying to engage staff. And I get it. I understand people are tired. In education, like I said, healthcare, we never stopped. We never stopped. It was 24/7. And so we never, and if I look back, we should have taken a pause to reset ourselves, to be able to rest, to be able to rejuvenate ourselves, and to be able to embrace going back into full in-school, in-person learning. And we didn't do that because we can't, because we have to teach children every single day. That's our job. But nobody said, whoa, hold on a second. Like, we have some people just like healthcare who've been working tremendously, who haven't had an opportunity to kind of get back into. It was just like that. On a dime, you're back in school and make everything work great. So difficulty with that. In terms of anti-racism and our inclusivity and equity efforts, we are deeply committed to this work. It's challenging work, and that also takes a toll on people. I know I'm white. My senior team is white, much to my chagrin, and that's work that I need to do. A majority of our staff are white, so a lot of work in that area. And how do you measure the outcomes, right? We've done a staff census, we've done a student census of who's our makeup. We know that our staff do not represent our students, and we know that our students will learn better when they see individuals in front of them that look like them. So a tremendous amount of work, like I said. We have a dismantling anti-Black racism strategy. It's a 5-year plan. We also have an equity plan that's a 5-year plan, and working with many community partners in order to bring all of that work to fruition. Much more needed in that area, and we know we make a lot of mistakes, but we're committed to the journey to make that work. In terms of infrastructure, we've had millions and millions, like I mentioned, given to our schools, but we still have some significant needs. You know, never would I have thought when I started teaching that would come a day where I'd be like, oh man, if that roof leaks, oh man, if that boiler goes down. And here I am, you know, a couple months ago, superintendent called, was late on a Sunday night and said, all of the heat's down in X school. Don't think the kids can go to school tomorrow. And I sat there and like, it's 10:20 on a Sunday night. Why do I care about this? I care about it because what about the buses who are going to be on the road at 6:30 in the morning to pick up those kids? What about the parents who have to go to work who don't have childcare in place? Oh, what about the childcare that's in that school that's going to be getting those kids in the first thing in the morning? And then all of a sudden it started. So needless to say, not a lot of sleep that night because it just kept running through my head about the impact of one school without heat in it and what that can look like in a community of people. So thankfully, our lovely service team was out, figured out what was happening. It was a little wee switch that needed replacement, not a, oh, we have to wait for something for 6 weeks to get in and we're rerouting kids. So they fixed it and school opened. And partway through the next day, I thought, nobody even knew that happened because school just went on like usual. Nobody knew that I was stressing all night, that our facility services people were in the building all night. And I guess that's what the beauty of behind the scenes of what can happen when people come together. This year in September, we're opening 2 beautiful new schools, and we'll be opening our Beacon Heights out in this area actually, which is replacing DM Eagle. And then the students from grade 7 and 8, so that was a K-6. The 7 and 8s went to A.B. Graham, so now it will be a full kindergarten to grade 8 school of elementary. It's an amazing school, sits right next to Lakewood. If you get a chance and you want to see it, would love to bring you on a tour. And then we'll be opening, and I'm sure all of you already know this, our new kindergarten to grade 12 school in Kingsville, and it's Erie Migration District School, and that is actually replacing 3 schools. So that will replace Kingsville District High School, and also Kingsville Public School and Jack Minor Public School. So those 3 schools will come together in one. People are calling it a mega school. I don't like the name of mega. It's a school. It just is kindergarten to grade 12. very similar to our Vista and our Herman school. Beautiful schools. The Kingsville School is the biggest funding that has been given by the government in the history of school builds. So initially we received $44 million 10 years ago to build that school. And we're coming in around 51 million. So we're hoping that the ministries realize that costs have gone up substantially and that they'll give us some more money. Otherwise, I'll have another deficit in my capital priorities that we need to find money for. And then I just want to end on community partnerships. I know, you know, having been a Rotarian, having been very involved in the community, that nothing can happen in our schools without our community partners. We don't have the resources, and our role is to educate children. When you get to the core of what our business is, it's to educate children. And so it's all through collaboration. And there was a recent announcement around a national school food program through the federal government. And I know Rotary's been very involved in our breakfast programs, and we're so grateful for that. And people think, oh, that's great, right? The federal government's going to pick up the cost to feed children every single day a meal. So we've yet to find out what we're actually going to be getting from the federal government. But based on the amount of funding that was announced across Canada, I'm thinking we'll probably get, if we're lucky, because we do have some really high need areas in our community, we may get around about $100,000. That in no way, that won't even feed one school for a full year of schooling. So we've done a couple of projects with We Are One food program that runs the Michigan school food programs. And obviously the precursor to learning is that you have food. When you think of Maslow's hierarchy, without food, without safety, and without shelter, you're not going to learn. So we can do the best that we can possibly do to teach children when they're coming to school and they're hungry. That doesn't matter. When they're coming to school and they don't feel safe, we're not going to be able to teach them as well as we could if they had all of those needs met. And a perfect example was, so PC brand funded actually our alternative education, our high school. And because many focus on our elementary schools and provide food there, which we're very grateful for, we have a lot of secondary students who go hungry, So PC gave grants every single year to the alternative secondary school. They used it as a teaching opportunity for students and created a culinary program, and the students would make food for themselves through this grant. 2 days after the National School Food Program was announced, PC informed that PC grants across the province would no longer, because the federal government was now picking up the necessary funding. So it's $6,000 that the school used to get, and they won't be getting that anymore. So the types of things that Rotary does, we're so grateful. Going in and reading to children. Although you think, oh, you know, I did it when I was in Rotary. Oh, I'm dropping in, I'm going to read for a half an hour. The impact that that has on children is tremendous. So I encourage you, if you have a chance and you want to go read, please do so. Reading is a critical lifelong skill that many children aren't learning right now. And so your work in that area is really, really important for us to be able to continue the work that we need to do. So just a few things when I look back on my first year, a whirlwind of a year. When I was a vice principal, I would say, wow, what's the principal do all day? They sit in their office, lucky them. I'm running around like a fool outside, catching the kids smoking, catching the drugs, the fight in the park, the this, the that, suspending of the kid, the parents screaming and yelling because their child got suspended, and the principal's just sitting in there. Then you sit in the principal chair and you're like, whoo, boy, this is, whoo, what a job. I equate that to being a superintendent and director. You're like, wow, what does the director do all day? We are here busting our butts, doing all of the programming and all of the other work and the finance and the human resources and the, what's the director doing? Fast forward a year later, it's a busy job. I have 10 trustees. So the political, and I am not political, the political world you enter is very different because you're trying to navigate all of that. You've got, they are my boss. I am their only employee. The other 5,000 are my employees. Then you've got the community pieces, which sometimes can be extremely challenging. And then you've got a ministry that you report to, that you got to do a dance. You've got MPPs that you need to work with, who aren't always that easy to work with. So it's a really complex, although I knew until you're living it, you don't realize the complexities of the work. And some days I just say, you know, I really wish I could just focus on learning. Because that's what our work is, but you get so taken away from that, so far away from it. Sometimes it's hard to believe that you get caught up in that. So during the day, it's the people. I'm always out in schools, always out doing things in the community, building those relationships. And then at night, I try to actually get paperwork done, but not doing a very good job of that sometimes. So we're committed to the issues, to the challenges, but they are difficult, bigger than ever, I would say. But in no way, every single day with my senior team, our focus is on the student every day. And I'll go back in closing to Mary Jean. When I got the job, Mary Jean asked me to go out for lunch with her, and I thought, oh, I'm going to get a Mary Jean speech. That's okay. I love Mary Jean speeches, but I'm going to get it. And so she came and, you know, kind of gave me a little bit, but she also said she'd been out of it for a long time. So the job looked different than when she was in it. And she gave me a little crystal, and it had a little flower inside of it. And she said, you'll probably remember I always had this on my desk. And I did, I remembered it. It was always there whenever you would go to her office, which wasn't often because you didn't want to have to go see the director. But it was sitting on her desk, and she said, I want you to have this. And I said, oh, I'm honored, you know, that you would give it after all these years, that you would give this to me. And she said, I've kept it over the years waiting to be able to give it to somebody. And I'm so grateful that I can give it to you. So our last two directors were not from our community. And I, you know, started my career in Greater Essex and will end my career in Greater Essex. So she said, I want you to have it. And she said, and I want you to put it on your desk. And she said, and every morning when you walk into that office, whatever time it is, you look at that and you remember that those are the students that you are there to serve. And every day when you leave, you look at it again. And you think about those students that you were supposed to serve that day. And she said, and when you get home, when you lay your head on your pillow, if you don't sleep well, it's that telling you that you didn't do what was best for students, and you made a decision that was not what's best for them. Because it's easy to make decisions that are not best for students. It's easy to make decisions that are better for other people and not for students. And she said, if you don't sleep well, you need to get up the next morning and you need to fix what you did the day before and don't ever do it again. And she said, and if I find out, and you know, I am so connected to the community. One of our principals lives right across the street. And she said, I will come and I will take that back from you because you don't deserve it. I'm like, oh, that's a lot to live up to. So I look at it every day, and I think of Mary Jean, and I think about the honor and the privilege that I have to serve the students, and I'm so grateful. So thank you.
Oh, man.
Happy to take questions if anybody.
Well, we on a time schedule.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I just wanted to say thank you very much as a fellow educator.
Yes,
It's
we've known each other since our spec ed days.
yes, it's a privilege to have you here and to listen to your story. It's nice to know that at both boards we have one and that.
Yes, yes.
So,
Amalgamated is
not
a
saying
gem.
anything.
Amalgamated is a gem.
So I'm hoping that there's a lot of
There is.
back
There
and
is.
forth, and that's awesome. So we could probably take maybe one question.
It's over. Can you, I'm thinking from a taxpayer ratepayer.
Mm.
When a school closes, I'm thinking Leamington, and I believe it goes to the other school board first, like. Does the school board get to sell it, not pocket the
Yeah.
pocket, but distribute it within the education? As opposed to, I think Valente is developing the Leamington High School properties.
Excellent question.
We have over here, as you mentioned, DM Eagle.
Yep.
Which is, you know, situated next to Beach Grove. I mean, that's a valuable chunk of property.
Sure is. So excellent question. The old days were, there was a priority listing of where it had to go. And it used to be able to go to a coterminous board or to municipalities or those types of things. And you could literally pay $1 for that land transaction. Now it's all fair market value. So there's an appraisal that's done on all of them. And municipalities and coterminous don't automatically get preferential. The minister, who was Stephen Letch at the time, changed that regulation. So now it goes out, so companies like Valente can bid on it. And we do get to keep right now. We do get to keep, we have a rumblings that that's gonna change, that the ministry will take that money back. But we cannot use it in operations or in terms of teacher and learning. We have to use it in terms of infrastructure. So we get a little bit of money that we put into that pot to say, oh, we need to do, you know, upgrades on windows at X school. A lot of Kennedy and a lot of Walkerville came from that money. We're doing Hugh Beaton right now. It's that little safety for when you do want to do some rebuild stuff, but you cannot use it to build a brand new school.
Thank you.
You're
Thanks,
welcome.
Bob.
Great question.
So on behalf of our club, we have something on honey, say thank you.
Thank you.
Happy to have you here again whenever you want to visit us.
Sure.
And we wish you the best in the school year because I've heard that it's been very tough.
All right, thank you.